Welcome to HealthTech Heroes, where we talk to innovators who are rewriting the DNA of healthcare. Today, we are joined by Daniel Wilson, co-founder and CTO of Legion Health, a Y Combinator-backed startup that's revolutionizing mental health labor market through AI. Daniel brings a unique blend of technical expertise from Princeton University and Microsoft, combining with a passion for solving complex healthcare challenges. From automating Excel workflows to building the future of psychiatry, Daniel's journey exemplifies how diverse technical backgrounds can drive meaningful healthcare innovation. Welcome to HealthTech Heroes, Danny.
Thank you very much, Foss. I appreciate you having me.
And it's such a pleasure to have you here. And I think you're one of the few people who have moved fully from a technical side to the healthcare side. And I'm happy to have you here and pick your brains on this. Daniel, you went from studying operation research at Princeton to working at Microsoft on Excel automation, then made a dramatic pivot to mental health care. What was the moment or experience that made you realize you wanted to dedicate your career to transforming mental health? Was there a personal connection that drove this decision?
There very much was. The pivot was actually almost an accident in a way. More than anything else, I've always loved building things that have as far-reaching impact in a positive way has been kind of like one of my core life drivers, I suppose. And it was actually my co-founder, Yash, our CEO, who, as we were sort of playing around with side projects, building random things during COVID, he's the one who pushed us towards, what if we actually were to go build an actual company, something that made a difference in the world? Yash has always been very deep in the healthcare space, and so his one caveat is that it had to be healthcare. Now, I've going in, never really had too much of an intention to be in the healthcare space. That wasn't really something that close to my radar. But as the three of us, myself, Yash, and Arthur, dug into what we could actually build that would have major impact, the first thing is that we discovered how many really important open problem spaces there are in general. But the second thing that we discovered is that all three of us had a core, deep, familial or personal experience with mental health. And in my case, I have a really, really close friend who struggles with bipolar disorder. And there was this time many years back when she reached out to me and mentioned that she was sort of in a headspace at the time that meant she was really, really struggling. Something that's really hard to deal with alone. And she was reaching out looking for help, somebody to be there in the moment with her. But also, I realized that she needed a level of help that I simply wasn't qualified to give. And the thing that I decided it might be something within my capabilities is to help her find a medical professional or a clinician who actually could deal with the root issue and help her get to a more stable place. So she and I, mostly driven by me, reached out to approximately 50 to 100 therapists and psychiatrists, ones that would hopefully be specialized in the conditions that she was struggling with. And of those 50 to 100, let's say, 2 of them reached back out and said that they actually had availability for a visit with a new patient. One of them canceled within 15 minutes because they had too much going on, too much to balance. I don't remember the exact reasons. And the other one just simply was not a fit. And at the end of this experience, we almost lost her. And going through that kind of loop, even though it wasn't necessarily myself directly, but watching how difficult it is when somebody actually makes that step to ask for help, to seek help, and then being unable to find it, is something that I realized would be pretty compelling to dedicate a large portion of my life to. So that's what it was on my end.
You discounted your role in everything that happened. I think especially people when they need help, reaching out to 50 on their own is just impossible. And then the end not getting help is even more devastating. I think it also highlights the role of a caregiver in conditions like this. So you had taken up a role as a caregiver at that point of time, and kudos to you. And I did get goosebumps when you're telling the story, so it was very impactful to me to hear it from you, and I can imagine what you personally went through there. And I hope she is
She's doing much better, by the way.
Okay.
We were able to find somebody eventually, and she's really thankful for the relationship she has with her provider. It's really done a lot.
That's wonderful. So I will try and take you out of this a little bit of an emotional situation here. Looking back at your early internship at places like Merck, where you worked on disease tracking through social media, and BMP Paribas, where you use machine learning for financial markets. These are pretty diverse experiences. Where did you really nail that, okay, technology can make the biggest human impact, and you have stayed true to your technology roots, but also you are in healthcare? How did you stitch this together?
To be totally honest, I'm still kind of working on that, but also discovering that on a regular basis. The way that I roll up that experience is less so the companies that I was at and more so the projects that I had the opportunity to work on. I think my time at Merck was sort of as a formal software engineer in a way. I've always, as mentioned, been more of a builder, and in my Booz Allen and BNP and even Microsoft experiences, it's much more so outside of the direct engineering space. In BNP, lots of data analytics. At Booz Allen, it was mostly data analytics stuff. At BNP, there's a lot of global markets, equities, foreign exchange, data analytics again, but also the beginnings of some automation and sort of workflows, but driven by robotic process automation is the technical term. And at Microsoft, I had the distinct pleasure to work directly as a part of the Microsoft Office platform team. This is the team responsible for, among other things, VBA, Office scripts, worked very closely with Power Automate, which is Microsoft's Zapier analog. And I got to work with this user group that effectively is the users of Office and of Excel in particular that are really compelled and motivated to automate their own workflows, to make their lives at work more efficient, and do so even though they aren't necessarily a technical programmer by the standard definition of the word, and their daily work. And one of the things that I've increasingly discovered in healthcare is that the people in healthcare are amazingly knowledgeable. I mean, on the clinician end, of course, spend so many years in school, practical, hands-on applications. And a lot of the times the technical options to automate things are sort of out of reach. Those who are more traditionally trained as programmers spent the same or similar amounts of time working deep in the weeds of code. One of the things that I think we've been really lucky to marry together is this idea of subject matter experts who are absolute rock stars at the role that they play in a more traditional healthcare context. We've been really lucky to have found a number of these people, place them in roles where not only do they perform those traditional functions, but also in a way that they can work very, very closely with me on a daily basis and try to turn all of the, call it the tedious parts of their roles, almost that execution component of running back and forth on phone calls with pharmacies and insurance companies and dealing with balancing a particular note or something similar. And what we've discovered is that the really important, valuable piece of their experience is very often less so the doing and the execution, but the difficult question of what to do and why. So we're working really hard to try to codify the execution component of their more traditional roles and to place them in the driver's seat.
All right. It almost seems like, you're, I'm going to take an F1 car example or a motorcycle racing example because it's kind of a brazen act that you have done. You are with ton of brands all over your place, like Princeton, Microsoft, BNP, Merck, and Booz Allen, right? Everything, all the brands on yourself, and you're brazen enough to race out of all those brands and start your own. You were doing really well. And you can have probably retired in 10 years with that kind of branding. What made you shift? What was that mindset change that occurred to you, said that, no, I need to do this. I need to take this on my own and take the risk. And there is a huge risk with any entrepreneurship, right? So what is that mindset change that you had?
Yeah. In a weird way, I don't know that I ever saw it as all that much of a risk. I think I saw staying at these larger companies as the biggest risk and leaving the opportunity to build something truly novel and rethink the ways that things are done. Biggest risk was leaving that unexplored and off the table. And granted, companies, especially like Microsoft, are innovating and doing some absolutely incredible and world-changing things. But one of the things that I tended to find while being there is that rethinking things from the ground up, when they already have so much that they have accomplished, so much that they've done in a particular way, it's not the best or most conducive environment to that kind of ground up restructuring type of thing. And that's really what I think it's going to take in a lot of ways to improve a lot of parts of the US healthcare system. Might be a hot take, might be a little bit of a dicey thing, but the reality was staying rather than going off and trying to do something of my own or our own was really the thing that I think scared me the most.
I think when I asked for a mindset, I knew I'll get an answer. I did not expect this. It was like, hey, you need to be brave, you need to take the risk. But you're saying like, hey, I actually was walking away from the risk. That is a wonderful mindset that you have, and something that I think a lot of us can learn. Legion Health is described as building the future of mental health labor market. That's a big task, and I'm sure you guys are wonderfully up to it. Can you break it down for me, what it means in practical terms, and what specific problems are you solving and others haven't been able to address?
Absolutely. I'll give it my best shot, and then I'm going to look to you to help me stay in the more practical, at least at first. The mental health labor market tagline is actually sort of the first version or so of our business. This was an iteration of Legion that came out of the COVID pandemic. It was the earliest days in which medicine was now legally allowed to be practiced via the internet. And it was something that was absolutely incredible for the mental health industry because unlike most other medical specialties, there's no fundamental need for hands-on patient. Now, there's a lot of debate and back and forth as to the advantages of actually being in person in the same room with your provider, with your clinician, and vice versa. On the other hand, Zoom and video chat calls were particularly conducive to the other option, which is all of us being trapped inside in 4 square walls in a box over the course of the entire pandemic. So given that, we had sort of found a way to engineer an option for mental health providers to work across many different platforms and to fill their schedules effectively while working from home. This was a novel thing at the time. What we eventually have gotten to is this kind of realization similar to that, where I don't know that I would call it a revolutionizing of the labor market anymore, but more a revolution around care operations. What I mean by that is, as I've mentioned earlier, we realized that the true value in the humans involved in operations and clinical processes, knowing what to do and why, is far more important than the actual legwork of then executing on that. The emergence of language models and agents has obviously created a lot of opportunity to rethink the way things are done in every industry. In mental health in particular, there is an extra X factor, if you will, which is up until the early emergence of, let's say, ChatGPT, or even before that, GPT 3.5 or even 3. There was no reliable and consistent way to make sense of the one type of data that's truly available in mental health. The one type of data, the dominant type, is language. In every other medical specialty, or most of them, I don't know that I want to speak in universals, you'll have lab tests. You can do a blood test for a particular disease, disorder, genetic condition. You can do an X-ray for a broken bone. You can do an EKG for cardiac issues. But in mental health, you don't have that option. We can't do an X-ray for your brain. I mean, you can take an X-ray of your brain, but it's not going to help you all that much.
Yeah, some conditions it does, but yeah.
Exactly. Mental health has been left in this really difficult place for a long time, in which even if you were able to collect the data on a given patient or all of your patients to the scale that you might in other specialties, you can't do anything with it. But in this era of language models and agents, that's changed significantly. The things that this makes possible in mental health are far beyond even just the agentic and language model developments alone that are already by themselves making huge differences in other industries. The mental health space is benefited by this extra factor of now all of a sudden you actually can draw conclusions, do analyses over notes that a provider has taken to help them extract and remember insights from a visit months or even years before, to read the ridiculously long arbitrary reasons that an insurer might reject a claim for, and then do something about it. And so we've been able to surface these kinds of insights to our incredible team that I'm really thankful for. And then to kind of record and sort of internalize to these agents the conclusions, insights, and background knowledge through experience that our human team has to make their lives much, much easier on the execution front so that they can do what they do best, taking in a lot of information about a patient and knowing through experience, through their training, what is going to be the best path, what is going to be the best action forward in an informed way that hasn't been possible before.
I want to acknowledge one part that I have heard for the first time is that mental health largely is driven by the language, the diagnosis and the conversation and the testing and the conclusions. And the fact that this is the technology right now is a lot of it is based on NLP and the large language processing. Both of those have LLMs and NLP have language as a part of their core. Makes it that much impactful on mental health. So that line I've never seen before, and this is the first time that I am recognizing that line. That was really good. So at Legion Health, you are a CTO. So you are a tech guy, right? Sorry to box you, but I have a reason for that.
No, that's totally okay. I have some thoughts on that as well, by the way, but for practical purposes, I have to say yes.
So from a technical perspective, I've been on the technical side a little bit too, and we want to make everything efficient. But healthcare also has that human side of it, of empathy. And sometimes if we make things too efficient, that everything is based on technology, then we might risk taking away the physician and the patient interaction. How do you balance that from your mindset?
I think this is probably one of the most important questions, and I'm really glad that you asked about it. The unfortunate reality, fortunate, I don't know, you could debate back and forth, but the reality, let's say, is that a vast majority of artificial intelligence startups and then larger companies building in the space in healthcare seem to be focused, among other things, primarily on automated diagnosis, or put another way, automating away the clinician. And this is something that I think, especially so in mental health, is a mistake. It removes the one piece that is perhaps most important, which is trust and human connection. The part that we are focused on far beyond any sense of clinical. We actually stay as far away as we possibly can from applying those LLM automations directly there. We have a number of tools to help clinicians find and draw insights, but where we automate and try to build efficiency is on the operations side. It's the extra added steps that a clinician might have to deal with in between or after visits for any given day. We work primarily with PMHNPs and psychiatric mental health nurse practitioners is the full acronym. If you are a PMHNP or a psychiatrist and you've been seeing patients for 10 hours for a full day, your day is not over. You still have charting, chart review, coding so that the insurance company will actually pay you or your organization, assisting with any follow-ups that patients need beyond the context of the visit, dealing with the fact that you prescribed the medication to a patient and the pharmacy that the patient asked you to send it to is actually out of stock. All of these execution things that need to occur beyond the bounds of the visit take away focus or time that the provider can actually spend truly connecting with and working with their patient on. And that's where we put all of our energies and our technology, not within that bond and that trust and communication between the patient and their provider, but in the rote execution of our front office team knows exactly what needs to be done, but it takes time to sit there on the phone and do the legwork. Our provider knows exactly what's wrong at the pharmacy, but the pharmacist hasn't answered, and so you fax things back and forth and wait. This is the ridiculous time suck and inefficiency that I believe should be targeted first, and whichever order, regardless, definitely needs to be solved.
So that the physicians get more bedside time rather than taking away that connection.
Exactly.
They get more time with the patients and not doing chart reviews.
You got it.
All right. And you did mention you're building future of psychiatry through AI, and this, you mean the system of psychiatry, everything that is meta to the treatment itself. Is there where you're focusing primarily?
That's a good way to put it. Meta to the treatment. We usually think of it as care operations.
Okay.
It's everything that happens outside the visit, not within it.
Okay. Wonderful. So you have hit a big milestone, Y Combinator S21. And so what was the reason or what is the core of this win? And also, what challenges are you going to face because of this milestone? You reach a milestone, then your journey begins again, right? And what are the challenges you're facing ahead?
You talking about the Y Combinator batch as a milestone? Yeah, so this was summer of 2021, which actually feels like eons ago in a way. But that definitely was an absolutely incredible launching pad for what it is that we're building and for the three of us as founders. Since you mentioned you might ask for some entrepreneurial advice, I may save that one for a little bit later. But let's talk about major milestones that are perhaps a little bit more in the immediate. We actually closed off about $6 million in total raise sometime mid last year and then spread between several months before that. And we chose to do so even in a position where we might have been able to go straight to a Series A round because things are working. Numbers are looking great. We're able to take care of the rather large number now of patients that we currently have, approaching about 2,000 patients at the moment. And we're able to take care of them with only one patient support human. The rest are this human's efforts augmented by agents. Now, this is, from my understanding, best I can tell, pretty unheard of in the healthcare space and especially in mental health because there's just so much variance, so much complexity to the number of different things that can be going on. And a core crucial milestone is going to be in the next several months as we continue the pace of growth that we're currently on. Will that stay the case? Is that going to remain possible? Or is the reality that we'll have to scale in a way that is more traditional to most healthcare companies by hiring more talented and experienced humans? Now, it's not to say talented and experienced humans would be a poor thing to add. However, doing so in a way that we can continue to augment their efforts, their knowledge, and their experience, rather than, again, kind of very common thing is like call centers, getting a whole bunch of people who can just do that rote work as a human. That's perhaps one of the most important questions that is top of my mind. It's going to be the deciding factor as to whether or not we are just another more traditional healthcare company, which be totally fine. Like, we're able to take care of a large and growing number of patients and really make a difference in their lives. But if we can make a difference in the way that that is done across the industry, then I think we'll have something really, really special. It's an important moment.
That's fascinating. And you said one human and multiple agentic AIs and 2,000 patients. That's a pretty remarkable ratio. And the 2,000 patients are from similar systems. How many different systems are these patients coming from? Because in healthcare, dealing with each system is a big challenge because those are really different systems. So is it like one big system, or you're dealing with like 2,000 different systems, or is it somewhere in between?
You talking about where our patients primarily come from? Yeah, a whole bunch of different ones. So I'm not going to speculate as to the number. That's not really my area of the business, but we cover majority of the private insurers or private healthcare insurers in the state of Texas. Our footprint is only coverage for Texas-based patients, but that is going to be imminently, you didn't hear it from me, expanding in the near-term future. The primary places that we source our patients from are, number one, Psychology Today, interestingly. For those unfamiliar with it, it's sort of the Craigslist of mental health. It's been around for decades. It's a publication originally on the topics of psychology, psychiatry, really awesome mental health resource. But it also has a directory, and this directory has effectively a phone number, an email, and a link to the provider's website. It's very, very basic, but because this is sort of the go-to, their monthly active users are in the millions. We get all types of different patients with the many different insurers we cover. Second place that they come from is from the insurers' directories themselves. And the third is via referrals from providers. I've been lucky to have built a bunch of relationships with really amazing primary care providers and the like, local education institutions, who, when they have patients who are in need of psychiatric services, they'll send them our way because they really trust what we can offer to their patients. Yes, it absolutely is a pretty crazy operational ball of yarn, let's say. in order to deal with and manage the many conditions they come in with, the different insurance types. But each of those subtly has a number of nuances, but they're the same types of nuances, if you will. Like, this insurer really likes it when you collect and provide this piece of information. That insurer prefers these billing codes with this support. This type of patient from this source likely won't come in with this extra data point or knowledge of maybe who their direct insurer is, let's say with an educational institution. Handling and accounting for, as a human team, all of that just rote bullet point nuance, it's almost impossible. But because of agents, we're able to keep that top of mind and make sure just collecting that info, sending the right thing is all feasible.
That's wonderful. So there are, like, say, 20 different variables among the patients. There are 20 different variables among the payers. Is collecting this one variable to any of the 20, it is exponential. But between these two, they are the same thing. But connecting this to the agentic AI is super efficient in doing it. That's what I hear.
That is a perfect roll-up. Yes.
Yeah. For a human to do that, it's like exponential, really crazy numbers. You're dealing with like millions of combinations. For AI, it's just 20 variables, you just mix it up.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
All right. I can see the math behind it. I'm sure there are more variables than 20, but I'm simplifying it a little bit here. You are paving ways, and I think the way you're thinking is pretty fascinating. Very conscious about what the healthcare need is and what it can do with technology and how you're marrying these two together. Where do you think technology and healthcare is going in the next 5 to 10 years? Is it going to get a little more impersonalized, personalized? Or where do you think it is going and where do you think it should go?
Asking me the easy questions today, right?
Yeah, very easy questions, of course.
To be totally honest, I find it very difficult to forecast even a year or two out with how quickly the world is moving these days. But I like the thread that you gave me a little piece of, which is it going to become more personalized, less personalized? I think emphatically the answer is more personalized. And this is something that I think is really important because, as we were just discussing, the number of variables that, let's say, clinician alone within a visit is expected to account for in the case of primary care, often as short as a 10-minute window of speaking with their patients. In the case of our mental health clinicians and mental health in general, it can be 30 minutes once a month or once every couple of months. That's just a practical reality of how much time clinicians have available to them, how many different things they need to account for that are standard, and standard for a reason, across every single patient in general. And this is all stuff that has to be done for compliance reasons, for best practices and health approaches, that sort of thing. But a large volume or a large fraction of the work that is done there, especially on the insurance billing side, data collection, managing and balancing of a calendar, that can be automated away. And that, as we discussed earlier, will give clinicians significantly more time with each individual patient and to understand each individual patient on an even deeper level. As a result of the above, have a much more personalized care experience just from that provider to patient time alone. If you really do get carried away, we're talking like 5-10 years out, that kind of handling of the variables that are specific to each insurer can, as you might imagine, be extended to the variables that are currently standardized across each patient. Once those are accounted for, one of the things that I'll give a tangible example for is like scheduling preferences. You can really get tight to what is best for an individual. So one of the things that we do is we pay very, very close attention to the calendar. And it doesn't necessarily seem like all that much of a big deal. You could probably intuit why this is an operationally difficult thing. If you need to reschedule a patient, then you'll probably have to rearrange others, let their respective providers know. But how do you actually account for the fact that a given patient might have a very strong preference for a time of day that might be different from their providers? Or even more granularly, a very strong preference for a very specific slot. What about keeping your calendar open when a patient is slowly starting to titrate up on a new medication that they haven't been on previously, one that has a very strong chance of side effects? If they have a side effect, you need to see them as soon as you possibly can, because this is a really important moment to make sure that you're there for them, to identify what's going on, see what the best path forward is and what should be done, which means you have to be really, really quick at this whole rearrange the calendar thing. We are able to actually forecast and load balance our calendar based on not the overall needs of the practice of the company, not just the company, but not just the provider's preferences and needs. But we're able to load balance around the individual specific patients and their medications and any number of other variables when we're actually handling scheduling and deciding what the best appointments for a given patient are. This is today. Now, I realize I didn't quite answer your 5 to 10 years question, but I imagine that you can extrapolate that into the future and say, yes, it'll be personal to a level that we can't even fathom today.
Yeah, and you did mention emphatically personalized. It did register in my mind. So one thing that I also want to put a pin on is when you said like the patients have strong preference for this time, and we can say like why does patient will have a strong preference for this time, but we are talking about mental health here, and they will have a certain requirement and certain demands which might seem unreasonable for many other patients in many other places, but for mental health patients there might be some strong preferences, and to take that into account by a human might get more and more complicated as we are dealing with like 1,000 patients or 2,000 patients. And I just wanted to pin that. It was a little thing that you said, but it kind of struck me.
Yeah.
So impressive thought process there. Thank you. So you have successfully transitioned from big tech to health tech entrepreneurship, and I'm sure there are other entrepreneurs and people who are looking to leadership, trying to get into healthcare. And is it something that you learned on your course, becoming a leader and becoming a healthcare entrepreneur, that you had learned early on in your career? Is there some advice that you'd give people from your perspective, Daniel?
I wish it were the case that I actually had learned something about healthcare in general, as well as some of these core leadership tenets that I've learned over time through practice and mistakes. But I came in more or less with a blank slate. To give you some color on that, I don't know that I actually knew how to use my own Microsoft health insurance. We're talking really surface level understanding, if any, of the entire healthcare ecosystem. But I'll tie that together with something else, and then hopefully that gives you a picture. There's a tenet at Y Combinator, which is, suppose it counts as their tagline, make something people want. Simple. There's a lot of meaning packed into that phrase. What we realized is that the most important thing, and this almost frustrates me as somebody who's a builder, somebody who's spent late nights and weekends hacking away on making this app or this other thing, the single most valuable part of our early days experience was the fact that going into the healthcare space, we came in willing to ask the stupid questions. Once we decided to build Legion together, Arthur Yush and I reached out to probably thousands of people on LinkedIn, through the Princeton network, through anybody who had like healthcare or like leadership executive, like MD or MD, PhD, anybody who was willing to talk to us. And we, at least very much so at the beginning, asked, what are the problems in healthcare? This is the most broad, open-ended, amateur question, I suppose, in a way. But we were willing to do that. Between October 2020 and February of 2021. I think we spoke to about 600, actually not about, I know the number, 656 individual people in that short couple of months time span. And over time, our questions, I hope, got a lot more targeted, specific, and I hope a lot better. That's how we sort of discovered the specifics of our problem space, more and more specifics about mental health. Through that, though, again, in asking the larger questions, I know an unfortunately large amount about care navigation, revenue cycle management, like hospital and EHR systems, number of things that, in all honesty, really have no direct connection to what it is we're doing today. But what we found in pushing really hard towards learned later in YC, building something that people really want, something that really matters, is able to put together, okay, getting this truly deep understanding of our space, understanding of what it is that is going to be best for patients, for providers, for the parts the people who actually make this arguably kind of dysfunctional healthcare system in the US function as well as it actually is able to. Identifying those core tenets has been really essential in building our company and succeeding to the level that we have. And it's also something I've been really thankful for as a leader, by reaching for this idea that, hey, we've been really lucky to have hired incredibly talented and just smart individuals. Taking that lens of looking towards, okay, I'm going to lean into your experience and your knowledge and your intuition. What is it that you believe is the most important and powerful thing for us to do? How can I make that happen?
That's powerful. I want to make a note here. When you say 656 people, initially in our pre-meeting conversation, I thought you divided 656 people between you three, but it turns out all three of you were in all these 656 meetings through those 3 months, and this is what it takes to begin to understand an issue.
That's a good call out. It really was. We were definitely Zoom power users in the early days, as I'm sure many of us were. But the learning that we got out of the experience, especially as a result of the three of us being able to debrief after every call, talk about, that is actually still an open problem. People spend hours dealing with the fact that their fax machine is now down and they can't get any records on any of their patients as they're coming in, and having to ask their patients yet again for something that the patients have told their previous provider 15 times. I'm sure the clinicians, I'm sure the operations people are not a fan of that. I'm sure the patients definitely are not a fan of repeating themselves 10 times. And that's one problem. There's no better way, in my firm opinion, to get this type of learning than from these types of experts, although actually the other better way is probably to get it directly from the patients and the providers themselves. So I'm really, really thankful for that experience. And again, I mentioned a little bit sad to have learned this in a way as a person who loves building, making something that did not exist a reality. The thing that really mattered was actually spending the time and doing the legwork to nail down what it was that people really wanted, what it was that they wished was different in the world. Not so much building this or that little widget or app or shiny thing and then seeing what would happen. That step, maybe we're kind of like leaking into if you have an advice question, but that step of really figuring out and talking to your users, figuring out exactly what it is that they want, what they would want more than anything else, that is the thing that matters.
Your motto or your tenet is build what people want. What is the difference between build what people need? Is there a difference in your mind between these two?
There is an important difference. And just to make sure I'm not taking credit for something that is not mine, make something people want is sort of the official tagline of Y Combinator. And the whole of Y Combinator is attributable to a bunch of amazing people like Michael Seibel, Sam Altman, Gary Tan, Paul Graham. That is something that YC has touted perhaps since the beginning. Make something people want. The difference between want and need is actually a really important one. I think we're lucky to have Michael Seibel as our direct batch partner, so catch up with him every so often when we have a chance to bother him. And the way he explains it is that it's really important for any startup and any founder to figure out whether or not what they have built is a medicine or a vitamin. If it's a vitamin, that may be something that people want, something that they're interested in having as a part of their life, something that they are willing to spend money on. But it is not essential. If what you're building is a medicine, another tenet of Seibel's is this a hair on fire problem or just something that seems pretty cool? If your hair is on fire, you are going to do whatever it takes, bucket of water, like any option that anybody gives you to put out the flames that are coming off the top of your head. If you desperately need a medication to stay alive, you are going to put aside every more for funsies thing in your life in order to be able to continue getting that thing. So the difference, as you asked, between something people want and something people need is important. But that YC tenet stands. It is an important reminder to check, is what you're building actually something that people want? It's a harder than it sounds problem to solve for. And there are a lot of people who I kind of feel for, because I've been in this position most of the times I've built something in my life. Spend all of these hours as a creator, as a maker, pouring your heart out into bringing a thing into the world, only to then realize, people don't really want it. And so checking that fundamental question first, and better yet, building something people need, is very important. It's perhaps the most essential thing as an entrepreneur.
Thank you very much. As we come to the end, I'll give you 90 seconds. You can take more if you want. If there is anything that we missed, or if you want to reiterate anything that you deem important, the 90 seconds is yours, Daniel.
Thanks for that. I don't know that anything in particular comes to mind, Fasa. I guess one brief thing I can throw out there is that if anybody's listening and has had the slightest question or the slightest itch to become a founder or to become a builder in the healthcare space, do it. Reach out to Fasa, reach out to me. Heck, you can share my info, Fasa, because there are not enough really smart people that are trying to build things that will change healthcare across the board, rethink the way that things are done, make things better on perhaps the most important set of open questions for humanity. And that is a darn shame. Do it. Go build.
Go build. And thank you very much for this, Daniel. That was really an incredible insight from deep technology know-how, but how you are thinking about technology into applying technology in healthcare. It is a junction that I have not explored as much as I should. And thank you for helping me see those lines blur. And I appreciate your time here.
Thanks for the opportunity to share. And Fasa, it's been a pleasure, man. Thanks for having me on.
It is my pleasure, 100%, Daniel.